Welcome, seekers of the Schadenfreude, apostles of the pathetic, watchers of the retro wasteland. I am on a quest to seek out Earth's worst retro games, attempting to play them, analyse them, and cry about them so you don't have to. I'll be using my powerful critical mind and an exciting Google Documents Excel sheet to stack these games against each other, spending the rest of my life seeking out the worst game that has ever been made. Remember folks, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, but the road to retro hell is paved with shit games. I talk about difficulty a lot on this channel, and it seems to come up an incredible amount during the road to retro hell because, for the most part, a lot of the games that end up on this flaming hot gravel path are games that didn't pitch their difficulty correctly. In some cases, well, in most cases, there are loads of other things wrong as well, but it usually boils down to this just isn't fun to play at all. Abu Simbel Profanation is a strange one because it is far too difficult, like almost to the point of no return. It's horrendous, but thanks to the modern age we live in, with its abundant use of save states and the ability to try over and over again, the game ended up revealing a glimmer, a tiny little spark of what could have been, and that intrigues me. Anyway, let's rewind. The game was released all the way back in 1985, published by Dynamic Software, a Spanish software company who, at the very least, published Phantomus, which is sort of a better version of this game in a way, and that's not surprising, I guess, as a lot of the guys who worked on this game worked on either Phantomus or Phantomus 2, or sometimes both, but not always both, and sometimes neither. They've all got Spanish names though, and I'm too scared to say any of them out loud for fear of butchering the pronunciations and being labelled as a Spaniard-hating monster. I'm not a Spaniard-hating monster, I've got one Spanish friend. This game actually forms the first part of a quadrilogy, moving on to some other games whose names I'm likely about to mispronounce. Babaliba, then Saimazoom, then Crystales, and the whole collection was known as the Johnny Jones Saga, which is a very easy name to pronounce. The Johnny Jones Saga is named the Johnny Jones Saga after the main protagonist, Johnny Jones. That's him there, that thing. Abu Simbel Profanation is a weird title, I'll be honest. The Abu Simbel part refers to the Egyptian temple that the game is set within, and profanation is a word defined as 1. The act or an instance of desecration, 2. The act of violating sacred things, or 3. The act of treating things with too little reserve or delicacy. Now, I suspect that the developers were aiming for definitions 1 and 2, but what they actually did was create a game that fits definition 3 almost perfectly, especially when it comes to the aforementioned difficulty. On first boot in the game, you may initially think, oh, this looks alright, decent chunky graphics, nicely detailed, not much colour clash, the game feels nice in terms of controls, and oh, I'm dead. In fact, here's a quick summary of my first 30 to 40 seconds within the game itself.
Dead, dead, dead. Someday you'll be dead, 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 dead. Someday we'll all be dead.
After about 5 games of not being able to get past the first screen, or even the first enemy, I was starting to think I had another Airwolf on my hands. But with judicious use of save states, and I'm talking saving after every single obstacle had been passed, I did manage to make it through to the end. Let's get further into that difficulty though, shall we? Because it's the one thing that you're going to notice straight away, and it's the one thing that brings this game crashing down to the ground harder than a mummy crashing into a pyramid. Okay, look, sometimes coming up with a really clever simile or metaphor is like rolling dice. Every now and then you throw the dice off the table, alright? Just go along with it. The first screen of the game is, I suspect, the vast majority of people's experience with Abu Simbel, certainly if they owned it back in the day on their poor battle-worn Spectrum. It does a good job of signifying to the player that the developers accidentally turned the difficulty dial up to maximum volume, and back in the 80s, there wasn't enough time to actually test these things. Everyone was too busy snorting cocaine and driving Ferraris, so the game shipped as is, and now we're left with this mess. Even if you do manage to get past the first screen, things don't really get any better. Every single enemy in the game has been placed in a position that requires the most exact set of moves and precise timing to bypass. It's not really something that can be learned. Everything feels like guesswork and luck. Hitboxes, particularly for the lethal water drops, feel sloppy and undefined. The game feels like it's been designed not as a challenge that it wants you to overcome, but as a gatekeeper to stop you from experiencing the ending. You don't have an awful lot of moves at your disposal. Left, right, a big jump and a small jump, something that many folk will recognise from the previously mentioned Phantomus and Phantomus 2. But in those games, you had a health bar that mitigated the sloppy enemy placement somewhat. In Abu Simbel, the slightest touch is instant death, and while 10 lives seems like a generous handout, you can quite easily lose them all in a matter of seconds, learning nothing and progressing nowhere. If all that wasn't enough, you also have death pits, something that fans of Jet Set Willy will no doubt recognise, an area of the game whose sole purpose is to extract each and every life you have left with no recourse. You've no way of knowing that the screen you're about to enter will do this, of course, you just have to remember the next time you get there. But honestly, even getting to this point feels like such a ridiculous stretch. I'm talking about an area of the game that only about 5% of anyone who has ever experienced this game will likely ever see. I really mean it when I say, if you can make it through the first screen of this game without losing a single life, you should count yourself as some sort of gaming god, never mind completing the actual game. And I did complete the game, albeit as a big cheaty cheater, but I wanted to see if the game actually had anything else to offer, if there was something more interesting behind the sandstorm of impossible jumps and hateful enemy placements. There is, in fact, a decent game behind all of this, and I don't know if that just makes me more annoyed. These guys built a game that could have been halfway decent and then made the unfathomable decision to make it nigh impossible. As you progress through the game, you'll find branching pathways, some leading to symbols which act as keys, and others leading to doors. You've essentially got to explore this tomb, find the relevant symbol for the relevant door, and head back there. Nothing exactly out of the ordinary, but the layout of these catacombs is layered and interesting, with warp points that push you forward to new sections, and areas that loop back in on themselves. This one particular area, in which you're flung down a chasm, able to see all of the areas that you then need to approach from different angles, multiple times, is a really clever way to guide your hand toward the next path of progress. Each new door you open leads to a new area, and each offers their own interesting take on the inside of this catacomb. But you'll never see it. Not without save states. You'll never see it because I defy anyone to actually learn the patterns within this game, to get better at it, to push further onwards. It is too rigidly designed in terms of its platforming. Enemy patterns feel offbeat and mean-spirited. The game happily gets you stuck in death loops that you had no way to prepare for. I could, in a way, compare the game to Rick Dangerous. A similar theme, a similar death count, a similar mean spirit. But with Rick Dangerous, the solution for me would be to remove the life system and provide infinite lives. That would relieve a lot of the frustration and have the difficulty in Rick Dangerous make sense. In Abu Simbel, even with an infinite life system, it wouldn't really fix the game's core issues. The game doesn't feel like something you can learn to get better at. It constantly feels like you're rolling dice, and they're always falling off the table. There's no nuance to the hazards. There's no real fairness in their placement. It's a game that has been designed to stop you from reaching the end. And I can tell you up front that the frustration isn't really worth it. All that being said, having completed the game, I left it for a day or two and I went back to try my hand again without save states, just to see if I'd learned anything of the timing or movement within Abu Simbel, and yes, there was a marked improvement. I could now get 3 screens in before I died. With practice, I may even get to 5. The point is, though, that for all of my misgivings with the game, I was still drawn back to it, to try again, to try and push myself a little further, even though it only felt as though approximately 50% of the deaths were my own fault. There was still a compulsion to keep trying. This is the first game on the road to Retro Hell in which I'm confident enough to say I don't think it's particularly made very well, and it's frustrating to a fault, but it's still bringing me back to play it. That puts me in a very weird position when I try to rank this game amongst the other piles of dreck that currently line the hallways of hell, because the game itself is, for the most part, reasonably well made. There's good level design, it controls well, decent graphics for the machine it's on. But all of that doesn't mean too much if you don't get to experience the majority of it. If it featured improved hitboxes and better signposting of enemy movement and no friggin' death pits, I honestly don't even think I could put the game in the road to retro hell. But those things are here to its detriment, and so it's going in at the top. This, so far, is the best game that I've played on the road to retro hell, because despite its glaringly ugly flaws, there is a game underneath that keeps dragging me back for another go. Night Trap might be more competent, but it's not a game I particularly enjoy, and I'd only ever come back to it to laugh at the cutscenes. When I first played the game, I didn't expect its placement to be this high on the list. When I came back to it after a few days, and then again the day after that, I knew. Call me a glutton for punishment if you want. Actually, that's pretty clear from this series in general, so we'll just leave it at that. Anyway, let's see what the next pile of shite is.